A danger to freedom greater than terrorism. Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. Hello, John.
Hi, mate. How you going today?
Pretty good. Quite interesting times we live in with regard to the cash ban.
Yes. So this is probably our first episode where we haven't been in studio together. So I'm actually talking from Sydney. So a lot has happened today about the cash ban that it's worthwhile to update our viewers on. I think the most important thing that is we've had our second political party come out to oppose the government's proposed legislation, and that's the Katter Party. So Bob Katter issued his own press release this morning. So Bob Katter, the member for Kennedy in the lower house, and he I thought it was a very devastating press release, very blunt about what he thought about the legislation. And there's a particular quote I thought we will just tell the audience, and we'll put it up on the screen. And Bob Katter this morning, 20th of August 2019, said, quote, "The danger here to our freedom is greater than the danger to our lives through terrorism." And so, some people thought that was a little bit of hyperbole, given Bob Katter, who he is and his background. But no, my view is that this is a significant assault on freedom, perhaps the biggest assault in the last 2 or 3 decades, and a lot of people are very worked up about this. And it's time that the public send a message to Parliament that there are limits to how far they can push the law, and this is one of those limits that they shouldn't cross.
Yeah, well, indeed, and of course it's about civil liberties, and I also think it resonates with ScoMo's Quiet Australians, right? So all the feedback that I'm getting is, just ordinary people in Australia say this isn't right.
Yep, absolutely. So yes, it's not just the people interested in public policy or particular ideologues. No, look, the average citizen has a conception as what does it mean to be an Australian, and what basic freedoms that we have. And obviously for nearly 2 centuries we've prided ourselves of being more freer than other parts of the world. And obviously this is a very regressive step, and a lot of Australians are very shocked and appalled that the government could even be contemplating such a move.
Yeah, and of course it's also quite interesting that the media now have started to pick it up. Okay, it's post the closing date for submissions, but at least now there's a little bit more a focus from the media.
Indeed. So yes. So this morning we had a flurry of activity in the press, and it was led off by a piece by the ABC. So business journalist Nassim Kadem wrote a piece she's a business journalist. She wrote for ABC Online. Now she's been watching our show. I spoke to her on the phone late last week, and we've been trading some notes. And obviously she was aware of our 2-part series in the beginning, and then I sent her our interview with Malcolm Roberts. So, without sort of saying too much, I think our reporting led the way, and it obviously sparked the interest of certain journalists in the press. And obviously, to her credit, she wrote a piece, and that got a lot of activity this morning. And so from that, there was other reporting, the Daily Mail online, the New Daily, News.com, the Associated Press. So now we're starting to get greater circulation about this issue. It's interesting. I had an email in the last few days by a viewer who spoke to, I think, one of their relatives about this issue, and they were just shocked that this was even on the table. And the relative said, "I don't know anything about this. It wasn't on the TV. I haven't heard it in the news." Well, so obviously, hopefully it now is in the news. And this morning I was invited to go on ABC Local Radio Perth, and I was on at lunchtime on ABC News 24. This afternoon I'll be on ABC local radio in Adelaide. And so obviously it's the 24-hour media cycle, and I'll milk it for what it is, and try to get the message out there. And I basically made 3 points. One is this is an attack on economic freedom and civil liberties. 2, the government has not presented sufficient evidence that this cash transaction ban will meet its policy objectives around the black economy. And I've sort of spoken about Professor Friedrich Schneider from the University of Linz, Austria, and we've spoken about his 2017 paper. And then obviously point 3, where I had the ability to talk about negative nominal interest rates and the cashless society and the broader war on cash and the IMF technical working papers, and where we are in the economic cycle. I've made those points, and I've said, this is not a conspiracy theory. There are sufficient international academics and elite economists talking about the need to abolish cash to make negative interest rates work, and we've quoted those sources, and those sources are legitimate. And the Australian establishment and the mainstream media can't ignore that. The RBA a week and a half ago said that they are ready to launch unconventional policy if the rest of the world goes unconventional. Philip Lowe said in front of the House Economics Committee that he doesn't want to do unconventional, but if forced, he will. Well, every other central bank says they're going to do unconventional. So one can assume by the governor's own logic that if he's forced to, he will. Well, everyone else says they're going to force him. So we will see quantitative easing. We will see nominal negative interest rates at some point. When we go into a deeper, once a recession starts or an economic shock were to commence, and obviously, the role of cash and the demand for cash in the Australian economy will be front and center as people try to avoid charges and negative interest rates from the commercial banks. And obviously these laws will come into effect at that point. And this is one of the points I made this morning, that when you're considering this legislation, you shouldn't be considering in the current environment. You should be considering in the future environment that you and I have been speaking about in the last few shows.
Yeah, and indeed, quite interestingly, it's not just here in Australia, of course, because the Fed in the US has quietly announced that they're actually going to introduce a faster payment system, a centralised payment system, just like we have in Australia. And it was actually mentioned as part of Jerome Powell's recent speech, but nobody picked it up at the time. But of course, now we're sensitised to the cash ban and the relationship between the cash ban and monetary policy. People now in the US are beginning to realise that it's a critical part of being able to implement the monetary policy, QE, negative interest rates. Without it, it's hard to do. So it's fascinating how this is now bubbling up, not just here in Australia, but more widely as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So the war on cash and negative interest rates is not just a local domestic story. It is a global phenomenon driven by global elites and global institutions. And to the extent that we can resist some of these global impulses here in this country, obviously that is what I'm focused on, given that I live here and I've got a family to obviously to look after their interests. And so now, in terms of where to from here, a couple of points to make. ABC Radio Online have a online poll. So why don't we put that poll up there? You and I, Martin, have voted in this poll, and I've put it out on social media. So about a half an hour ago, I checked the poll, and 1,429 voters had voted in the poll. 97.1% of people opposed the government's legislation. I would encourage all viewers to go on the ABC website and cast a vote. And obviously, I will try to make that poll and the results of that poll known to members of Parliament to show that while it is a relatively small sample size, it is a reflection that this is bad politics, bad policy, and even most parliamentarians, most of them really don't care about public policy, in my view, and they're more interested in naked political advantage. Well, if they're just Machiavellian and tacticians, well, even on that basis, this legislation is insanity. So hopefully we can get the message loud and clear. Now, I can reveal that that other members of Parliament are being pursued as we speak and being asked to formally state their position on this legislation. So we may have some more news about players like Sharkey and Wilkie in the lower house, and Labor in the Greens, and maybe Bernardi and the crossbench with Lambie and Central Alliance. So we'll see if we have more news to reveal there. But to those who put in a submission to Treasury, thanks for that. And obviously, Martin and you and I put in our own submissions, and my submission was quoted in the ABC piece, and some of my tweets were shown by the ABC, particularly about our interview with Malcolm Roberts. But the fight, I think, has just started. So there needs to be maximum pressure applied to politicians, particularly in the wake of some of the perspectives reported on by the ABC this morning. So there are some professional bodies like CPA Australia that opposed, came out against the bill, but there were others like Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand, as well as KPMG, who said the legislation wasn't strong enough, and they basically calling for the cash limit to be lowered from 10,000. So there are other voices who want to bring in greater tyranny than what the government has proposed, and I would say that there's still a fight to be had. I don't think it's necessarily over, and obviously that's where Senator Roberts said that pressure needs to be applied. And you and I can do so much, but everyone else has to roll up their sleeves and get Parliament to do their job.
Yeah, and indeed, in the next 24 hours or so, we'll be able to talk more about the change.org petition, which I think is also forming now, and that'll be another lever to pull. So more about that later.
Yes, yeah. I mean, look here. So we've got the petition that the CEC have set up, and I'm working on a couple of secret little projects around this, and hopefully we'll have a few things to announce next week.
Yeah, and I guess it's just worth sort of standing back and thinking that if you think of what the Interest of the People channel has actually been covering over the last few months, we've actually been generating content that's actually ahead of the news cycle. If you think about the cash ban, if you think about some of the social issues at Mandurah and other places too. So actually, you get it here first.
Yep. And I think it's like, I mean, so we've been doing this for a year, and we've had some successes. I mean, gold in 2018 with the RBA, forcing the RBA to reveal more information than what they had previously. Obviously, in terms of this year, we look at, obviously, mainstream media reported our commentary about the Irish housing bubble, and we were one of the leaders talking about that last year and this year with Eddie Hobbs this year. Obviously, we looked at, the secret Treasury meeting. I mean, that we had an exclusive on that. No one else talked about that or had that information. High-rise death traps. That conversation with Edwin, and we've started to see greater commentary on high-rise buildings after our show. Obviously Mandurah, and now the cash ban. So on certain topics where we do have expertise, to know we can bring in experts, that we do know that there are parliamentarians and mainstream media journalists watching our commentary, and obviously we try to be as careful as we can and try to bring in the most accurate and insightful analysis we can. And people are watching, and where we can get the interests of other groups like the mainstream media, they're taking our lead, which is good. So obviously, a lot of people have lost faith in the mainstream media, and I think there's an opportunity for journalists to redeem themselves by actually reporting real news rather than crap or gossip.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, as we always say, John, this is in the interest of the people, and it genuinely is, because these are critical issues that will affect many Australians. And as you say, in many cases, the mainstream media are very weak on or late to these critical issues. But at least we will continue our quest to bring the most insightful and careful analysis that we can in the interest of the people.
Absolutely.
Good to talk to you, John. See you soon.
Thanks, mate. All the best.
Bye. Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. We'll see you next time.